Senator Moore. Senator Sims.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. We don't support this bill. Indeed, this is a dark day for students in our country. It's a dark day for students in our country because Labor and the Liberals have done a dirty deal to hike up fees for students and to slug disadvantaged students. And make no mistake, that is exactly what this is, ripping money away from students and saddling them with more debt. And I have to say, it is an act of breathtaking hypocrisy that Labor senators have spent hours today deriding, criticising the Greens, standing up and talking about us being sellouts on the very day that they've done this deal with the government to dud students. And let's consider the facts here. Let's reflect on the facts of the day. Today, the Greens did a deal with the government to crack down on corporate tax avoidance. Meanwhile, the Labor Party did a deal to rip off students and scrap their scholarships. That's what they've done. What rank hypocrisy. They dare come into this place and lecture the Australian Greens about selling out. Well, when it comes to selling out, it's the Labor Party that wrote the book. They wrote the rule book. While the Greens have been going after big corporations, it's the Labor Party who are going after students, and students from disadvantaged backgrounds, students who are on youth allowance. That's who will be targeted by this. That's who will be targeted by this Labor cuts tax bill that's been revived by their mates over in the Liberal Party. A dirty deal done dirt cheap, some might say. That's the phrase I heard bandied around the chamber today. Senator Wong's return to the chamber. A dirty deal done dirt cheap. Well, it's not cheap for students, Mr Acting Deputy President. It's not a cheap deal for students because they're going to see their HECS fees increase by $6,000 on average per degree. A $6,000 increase on average per degree to their HECS fees as a result of the dirty deal done between Labor and the Liberals. More front than John Martin's to come into this place and call the Greens sellout, more hide than a rhinoceros. So let's consider the implications of what's been agreed here as part of this dirty deal between Labor and the Liberals. The student start-up scholarships are for $2,050 a year, and they're made available to any student who receives youth allowance, Austudy and Abstudy. And that's an initiative that was negotiated by the Greens with the former Rudd government to help students from lower income families, to help students with some of the pressures that we know students face, and dealing with things like textbooks, stationery and other essentials. And I do want to acknowledge the work of my colleague Senator Hanson-Young, who really championed those scholarships and worked very hard to negotiate them with the Rudd government. And of course it is very disappointing for the Greens to see them being ripped away as a result of this deal with the Labor and Liberal parties. In terms of the applicability of these scholarships, they are available for a wide section of the community, and a lot of students are going to be affected by this. So approximately 300,000 students were eligible for student start-up scholarships this year alone. And youth allowance, Austudy and Abstudy are accessed by about a fifth of all university students, and in order to qualify you have to pass the income threshold. So in effect, a student doing a 3-year bachelor degree would be adding on average $6,000 extra to their HECS liability or HELP liability. So for a student doing a 6-year degree, for instance, something like a law degree for instance, they would see their HECS debt, their HELP debt, increase by $12,000. Mr Acting Deputy President, Osman Faruqi, who's a social commentator on higher education issues, has done some analysis of the impact of this, in particular looking at the impact on students from low-income families, the very students that the Labor Party purports to want to stand up for. If you look at an arts student from a low-income family, someone who's eligible for youth allowance, their HELP debt will increase by 33%. 33% as a result of these changes. So the HECS debt will increase from $18,456 to to $24,606. And for an engineering student who is from a low-income family, their help debt will increase from $35,072 to $43,272. That's a 23% increase. A 23% increase, a significant increase indeed to students who are already doing it tough. So what we're seeing here is a shifting of the debt onto students, and in particular students from low-income backgrounds. And the Labor Party have talked about wanting to rein in the national debt. Well, the Australian Greens don't support shifting the liability of that debt onto students. We don't support putting that onto future generations to deal with. I should say, of course, Mr Acting Deputy President, I don't want to let the Liberal Party off the hook here. It takes two to tango. You can't have a dirty deal without another willing party. And we know on higher education policy that the major political parties in this place are all too often like steel and a magnet. They come together when it comes to ripping off students. They've got form in that regard. And it's pretty remarkable that after all the talk we've heard in this place about innovation and new ideas, that the Liberal Party have gone down this path. They talk about new ideas, innovation, but it seems that the only tool they have in their toolbox is a razor blade. The only tool they've got is a razor blade, and they love to wield it and try and cut public services. That's the Liberal Party's modus operandi. They tell us that there's never been a more exciting time to be an Australian. There's never been a more exciting time to be an Australian. Unless, of course, if you happen to be a student, from a low-income household, certainly not a very exciting time for them, particularly in the lead-up to Christmas. Now, I can understand this new government being desperate for ideas, because, particularly in the higher education space, because their deregulation agenda has been roundly rejected across the Australian community. It's been completely rejected and repudiated, rejected by this Senate, rejected right across our country. People don't want deregulation. They don't want $100,000 degrees. And so the Liberal Party are desperate to try and find new ideas. And I can understand they probably went to the policy cupboard and found it was bare, but someone probably found something lurking in there. Here's one they made earlier. Here's one Labor made earlier. Let's trot that out and see if we can reheat this unpopular policy and put it back on the table again. Let's dig this up. Let's dig this up and put it back on the table. And that's exactly what they have done. And, of course, the Liberals like the look of it because it's about cutting funding to universities, in effect. It's about shifting the burden onto students, and that's what they're about. And what we have here again is the Labor and Liberal parties swapping policy ideas in the higher education space. Now, I shouldn't be too surprised about that, Mr Acting Deputy President, because, after all, it was the Labor Party that invented HECS. It's the Labor Party that are the architects of the HECS scheme in this country, that trashed free education in this country. And, I remember Senator Kim Carr saying that this was a great achievement of the Labor Party, a great achievement of the Labor Party. Senator Wong's having a go, but she can dish it out. She can't take it. We've had to listen to it all day, so time to cop it back, I think. Time to cop it back. If you're going to lecture us for being sellouts, you've got to take it back.
Take your seat, Senator Sims. Point of order, Senator Wong.
Thank you.
Please.
Point of order, Chair. Perhaps the senator is misleading the chamber. Perhaps he should remind everybody, when he talks about the HECS scheme, that the Labor government put more money and more first to family and more disadvantaged kids into uni than any government.
That's a debating point. Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Sims.
Thank you. I'll continue. Look, Senator Wong is correct. It was the Labor Party who initiated free education in this country, and it was the Labor Party that took it away. The Greens are proud to stand as a party that support free education in this place once the Labor Party took it away when they initiated HECS. And of course, what we've seen since the initiation of the HECS scheme is bracket creep that starts to happen, and that's always the reality with this kind of policy approach. We saw Labor bring in HECS, and then we saw the Howard government come in. The Howard government come in and gradually start to increase HECS liability and gradually increase fees over 30%. You know, I remember as a student unionist the terrible impact that those HECS fees increases had, and they were made possible because of the policy work that the Labor Party had done when they were in government. They laid the foundation, and so they set the ball rolling. And of course we've seen what happens with that. Of course, we then saw when Labor were in government, they announced a series of cuts to the higher education sector, and we're dealing with the legacy of those today. First they were for it, then they were against it, then they're for it again. I'm not sure what position they'll take with the rest of the cuts, but we're dealing with this lot now. Maybe they'll work with the Liberals to revive the other half down the track. But in any case, we've found ourselves in a situation where we've got an appalling increase in HECS over many, many years, and the burden being shifted to students as a result of the consensus of the Labor and Liberal parties. So, in summary, and I know it's been a long night, and I don't want to talk for too much longer. We all want to get home for Christmas, Mr. President. But I will say that the Australian Greens do not support these changes, and we will never support efforts from the Labor and Liberal parties to try and shift the cost burden onto students. We don't support that. We don't support that. And we don't support kicking students and destroying scholarships in the lead up to Christmas. We want to see appropriate investment in our higher education sector, and we're going to be campaigning on that in the lead up to the election. So make no mistake, we're against this. We'll be voting against it, not just like the Labor Party. We don't just posture and say we're against it. We'll actually vote against it as well. We look forward to having a debate about making education affordable and accessible for all in the lead up to the next election. Thank you.